The bucket made a familiar sound as it rolled across the marble floor. It was past 9 in the evening, and the hallways of the Westbrook Conservatory were empty. The students had gone home, the professors had locked their offices, the security guard at the front desk was already half asleep, watching something on his phone with the volume turned low. But Raymond was still there. He was always there. For 15 years, he had worked as a janitor at this place. 15 years of mopping these same floors, emptying these same trash cans, and wiping down these same windows. He knew every corner of this building better than anyone. He knew which bathroom faucet leaked. He knew which classroom door squeaked if you opened it too fast. He knew the exact spot on the 3rd floor where the heating vent made a strange whistling noise every winter. But more than anything else, Raymond knew the recital hall. It was the biggest room in the whole building. High ceilings, tall windows, rows of red velvet seats that could hold almost 400 people. And right there in the center of the stage sat the most beautiful thing Raymond had ever seen in his life. A grand piano, black and shining, like it was made from the night sky itself. Every evening, after he finished his cleaning duties, Raymond would walk into that empty hall. He would stand at the back for a moment, just looking at the piano from a distance. Then, slowly, like a man approaching something sacred, he would walk down the aisle between the seats. His footsteps echoed in the silence. His heart beat a little faster, and when he finally sat down on that bench, when his fingers touched those keys, the whole world seemed to disappear. Raymond had never taken a piano lesson in his life, not one. He grew up poor, in a small town where people worked with their hands and dreamed small dreams. His father drove a truck, his mother cleaned houses. There was no money for music lessons. There was barely enough money for food, but Raymond had always loved music. Even as a little boy, he would press his ear against the radio and close his eyes, letting the sounds wash over him. He remembered the first time he heard classical piano on a fuzzy AM station. He must have been 7 or 8 years old. The music was like nothing he had ever heard before. It made him feel things he could not explain. It made him feel like he was flying. He never forgot that feeling. Years passed. Raymond grew up. He dropped out of high school to help support his family. He worked at gas stations, construction sites, warehouses. He got married young, had 2 kids, got divorced, watched his children grow up and move away. Life was hard. Life was busy. Life had a way of pushing dreams into the background until you almost forgot they were ever there. But the music never left him. Not completely. When Raymond got the job at the conservatory, he thought it was just another cleaning gig. But the first time he walked into that recital hall, the first time he saw that grand piano sitting under the lights, something inside him woke up. It was like meeting an old friend he had not seen in 40 years. He started teaching himself to play. It was slow at first. Painful, even. His fingers were thick and clumsy from years of manual labor. They did not move the way he wanted them to. But Raymond was patient. He was stubborn. Every night, after everyone left, he would sit at that piano and practice. He learned from YouTube videos on his old phone. The screen was cracked in one corner, and sometimes the audio would cut out. But it was enough. He would watch a video, pause it, try to copy what he saw, fail, try again, fail again, and keep trying until something clicked. He found sheet music in the trash cans sometimes. Students would throw away pieces they no longer needed. And Raymond would smooth out the wrinkled pages and study them like they were treasure maps. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. And slowly, very slowly, Raymond began to understand the piano. He began to feel it. His fingers started to remember where to go. The notes started to make sense, and the music started to flow. Nobody knew about his secret. Not the security guard. Not the other janitors. Not the fancy professors who walked past him every day without even looking at his face. To them, he was invisible, just the old guy with the mop, just another worker in a gray uniform. But alone in that recital hall, in the quiet of the night, Raymond was something else entirely. One morning, he saw a poster on the bulletin board near the main entrance. It was bright yellow, impossible to miss. The conservatory was holding open auditions for a televised talent showcase. Anyone could sign up. Students, teachers, even members of the public. The winner would get a chance to perform on national television. Raymond stood in front of that poster for a long time. His mop dripped water onto the floor. His heart pounded in his chest. A voice in his head told him he was crazy, a 52-year-old janitor with no training, no credentials, no nothing. What was he thinking? But another voice, quieter but stronger, told him something different. It told him that he had been waiting his whole life for a moment like this. It told him that dreams do not have expiration dates. It told him that he would never forgive himself if he did not at least try. Before he could change his mind, Raymond wrote his name on the sign-up sheet. The reaction was immediate. His coworkers found out within hours. During lunch break, they gathered around him in the staff room, laughing so hard that one of them nearly choked on his sandwich. "You? Playing piano? At the audition? Brother, you mop floors for a living. Stick to what you know. Those professors are going to eat you alive. You know that, right?" Raymond said nothing. He just sat there, eating his food, letting their words bounce off him like rain off a window. He had heard worse things in his life. Much worse. And he had learned a long time ago that the opinions of others could only hurt you if you let them inside. But late that night, when he was alone in the recital hall, the doubt crept in. He sat at the piano and stared at his hands. They were rough. Scarred. The hands of a working man. Not a musician. What if his coworkers were right? What if he was just fooling himself? What if he walked onto that stage and made a complete fool of himself in front of everyone? He took a deep breath. He placed his fingers on the keys. And he began to play. The music filled the empty hall. It bounced off the walls and the ceiling and the windows. It wrapped around him like a warm blanket. And as he played, Raymond felt the doubt begin to fade. This was who he was. This was what he was meant to do. He had known it since he was 7 years old, listening to that fuzzy radio in his parents' tiny kitchen. The audition was in 2 weeks. He had a lot of work to do. But for the first time in a very long time, Raymond felt something he had almost forgotten how to feel. He felt hope. The 2 weeks went by faster than Raymond expected. He practiced every single night, sometimes staying at the conservatory until 2 or 3 in the morning. His back ached. His fingers were sore, but he did not stop. He could not stop. Something was driving him forward, something bigger than fear, bigger than doubt, bigger than all the voices telling him he was wasting his time. On the morning of the audition, Raymond woke up before sunrise. He lay in bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling of his small apartment. The room was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. He thought about his father, who had passed away 12 years ago. He thought about his mother, who was now living in a nursing home 3 states away, her memory fading a little more each month. He wondered what they would think if they could see him now, their son, the janitor, about to walk onto a stage and play piano in front of strangers. He got up and took a long shower. Then he opened his closet and looked at his clothes. There was not much to choose from. Work pants, old t-shirts, a few flannel shirts he wore on weekends. But pushed all the way to the back, still wrapped in plastic from the dry cleaner, was a suit. Raymond had bought that suit 23 years ago for his brother's wedding. It was dark blue, simple, nothing fancy. He had worn it maybe 5 or 6 times since then. Funerals, mostly. He pulled it out and held it up to the light. It smelled a little like mothballs. But it was clean. It would have to do. The suit was tighter than he remembered. He had gained some weight over the years, and the jacket pulled a little across his shoulders. The pants were snug around his waist, but when he looked at himself in the bathroom mirror, he saw something he had not seen in a long time. He saw a man who was about to do something brave. Something crazy. Maybe. But brave. He arrived at the conservatory 2 hours early. The auditions were being held in the main recital hall, the same hall where he practiced every night. But today it looked different. There were cameras everywhere, bright lights, people running around with clipboards and headsets. A long table had been set up near the front of the stage where the judges would sit. And there were people. So many people. Raymond stood near the entrance and watched them file in. Young musicians in expensive clothes, carrying instrument cases and folders full of sheet music. They looked confident, polished, like they belonged here. Some of them were chatting with each other, laughing, shaking hands. Others were warming up in the hallways, their fingers flying over invisible keys, or their lips pressed to shiny flutes. Raymond felt his stomach tighten. He did not belong here. He knew that. Everyone in this room had spent years studying at schools like this one. They had teachers and coaches and fancy degrees. They had performed in concerts and competitions. They had everything he did not have. But he was here now. And he was not going to leave. He found a seat in the waiting area and tried to make himself invisible. It was not hard. Nobody looked at him twice. To them, he was just some older guy in an ill-fitting suit, probably someone's father or uncle, they must have thought. Certainly not a contestant. The auditions began at 10 o'clock sharp. One by one, the performers were called to the stage. Raymond watched them on a small monitor in the waiting area. A young woman played violin with such speed and precision that it made his head spin. A teenage boy performed a jazz piece on the saxophone that had the judges nodding along. A girl who could not have been older than 16 sang an opera song in Italian, her voice filling the hall like something from another world. They were all incredible. Every single one of them. With each performance, Raymond felt his confidence shrinking. What was he doing here? These people were real musicians, trained professionals. And he was just a janitor who had taught himself to play by watching videos on a cracked phone screen. This was a mistake, a huge mistake. He was about to get up and leave when he heard his name. Raymond Carter. You're next. His legs felt like they were made of stone. He stood up slowly, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. A young woman with a clipboard led him down a hallway toward the stage entrance. She did not say anything to him. She did not even look at him. He was just another number on her list. The walk to the stage felt like it took forever. Raymond could see the bright lights ahead, could hear the murmur of the audience, could feel the weight of what he was about to do pressing down on his chest. His palms were sweating. His mouth was dry. Every step felt heavier than the last. And then, he was there. Standing on the stage, looking out at hundreds of faces, the recital hall looked completely different from this angle. Bigger. More intimidating. The red velvet seats stretched back into the shadows, filled with people he did not know. The cameras pointed at him like the eyes of giant insects. And there, at the long table near the front, sat the judges. There were 3 of them. 2 men and 1 woman. The woman sat in the middle, and Raymond recognized her immediately. Everyone who worked at the conservatory knew who she was. Victoria Chen, one of the most famous pianists in the world. She had performed at concert halls in Paris, London, Tokyo. She had played for presidents and kings. She had won awards that Raymond could not even pronounce. And now she was looking at him with an expression that made his blood run cold. It was not anger. It was not curiosity. It was something worse. It was pity. "Good morning," she said, her voice smooth and controlled. "Please state your name and what you will be performing for us today." Raymond stepped up to the microphone. His voice came out rough, barely above a whisper. He cleared his throat and tried again. "My name is Raymond Carter. I'm going to play Chopin's Ballade, number 1, in G minor." A ripple went through the audience. Raymond saw people exchange glances. He saw eyebrows go up. He heard a few quiet laughs from somewhere in the back rows. The Chopin Ballade was one of the most difficult pieces in the classical piano repertoire. Concert pianists spent years perfecting it. And here was this old man in a cheap suit saying he was going to play it. Victoria Chen leaned forward slightly. "I see. And where did you study music, Mr. Carter?" Raymond swallowed hard. I never went to music school. I taught myself. More laughter now. Louder this time. One of the male judges covered his mouth with his hand, but Raymond could see his shoulders shaking. The other judge was writing something on a notepad, shaking his head slowly. Victoria Chen's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. You taught yourself, she repeated. And what is your profession, Mr. Carter? Raymond hesitated. He thought about lying. He thought about making something up. Something that would sound better. Something that would make them take him seriously. But he had never been good at lying, and he was too old to start now. I'm a janitor, he said. I work here, actually. At the conservatory. I clean the floors. The laughter erupted. It came from everywhere at once, filling the hall like a wave. People were not even trying to hide it anymore. Raymond saw a young woman in the front row lean over to her friend, whispering something behind her hand. He saw a man in an expensive jacket shake his head in disbelief. He heard someone say, loud enough for him to hear, "Is this a joke?" Raymond stood there and took it. He did not look away. He did not run. He just stood there, feeling the heat rise in his face, feeling the shame burn in his chest, and waited for the laughter to die down. Victoria Chen raised her hand, and the room slowly fell silent. She looked at Raymond for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then she sighed and gestured toward the piano. Well, Mr. Carter, she said, her voice flat and tired. Let's get this over with. Raymond walked to the piano. His legs were shaking. His hands were trembling. The bench felt cold when he sat down. He looked at the keys, those same keys he had touched 1,000 times before in the quiet of the night. But this was not the quiet of the night. This was the middle of the day, with hundreds of eyes watching him, waiting for him to fail, expecting him to embarrass himself. He placed his fingers on the keys. He closed his eyes, and he began to play. The first note rang out into the silence. It was soft, gentle, almost hesitant, like a question being asked to an empty room. Raymond kept his eyes closed, his fingers resting lightly on the keys. He did not think about the audience. He did not think about the judges. He did not think about the cameras or the lights or the laughter that still echoed in his ears. He thought about his mother. He remembered sitting on the floor of their tiny kitchen when he was 7 years old. The radio was on, playing something classical, something he had never heard before. His mother was at the stove, stirring a pot of soup, humming along even though she did not know the melody. The afternoon light came through the window and made everything glow, and Raymond had felt, for the first time in his young life, that music was magic, that it could take you somewhere else, that it could make the world feel bigger and smaller at the same time. He let that memory fill him as his fingers began to move. The opening passage of Chopin's ballade floated through the hall like smoke. It was slow and melancholy, full of longing and loss. Raymond played it the way he had practiced it 1,000 times, but also differently. Because now, there were people listening. Now there was something at stake, and somehow, that made the music mean more. In the audience, something began to shift. The whispers stopped. The rustling of programs and the shuffling of feet went quiet. People who had been checking their phones looked up. People who had been leaning over to their neighbors sat back in their seats. A strange stillness fell over the room, the kind of stillness that only happens when something unexpected is taking place. At the judge's table, Victoria Chen uncrossed her arms. She had been ready to stop him after 30 seconds. She had seen this before. Amateur performers who did not know their limits, who chose pieces far beyond their abilities and embarrassed themselves in front of everyone. She had expected Raymond to stumble within the first few measures, to lose his place or hit wrong notes, or simply fall apart under the pressure. But that was not what was happening. The music kept building. Raymond's fingers moved across the keys with a certainty that surprised even him. He was not thinking about technique or timing or any of the things he had watched in those YouTube videos. He was just playing, feeling, letting the music pour out of him like water from a broken dam. The ballade grew more complex. The melody twisted and turned, rising and falling like waves on a stormy sea. There were passages that required both hands to move in opposite directions, passages that demanded speed and precision and absolute control. Raymond had struggled with these sections for months. He had failed them more times than he could count. But tonight, in this moment, his hands seemed to know exactly what to do. A woman in the third row leaned forward in her seat. She was a piano teacher at the conservatory, had been for over 20 years. She knew this piece inside and out. She had heard it performed by some of the best pianists in the world, and what she was hearing now was different. It was raw, unpolished in some places, but there was something in it that she rarely heard anymore. Something real. It was emotion, pure, unfiltered emotion. Raymond was not just playing the notes. He was telling a story. His story. Every struggle, every disappointment, every late night spent alone with a mop in one hand and a dream in the other. It was all there, woven into the music, speaking louder than words ever could. The ballade reached its first climax, a thundering cascade of chords that filled the hall from floor to ceiling. Raymond's hands crashed down on the keys, and the sound was enormous, overwhelming, like a storm breaking through the walls. People in the audience felt it in their chests. They felt it in their bones. Some of them did not even realize they were holding their breath. And then, just as quickly, the music softened again. Raymond pulled back, letting the melody become tender and fragile. This was the part of the piece that always made him think of his children. They were grown now, living their own lives in distant cities. He did not see them often. Phone calls were short and awkward, but he loved them more than anything in the world, and that love ached inside him every single day. He poured that ache into the keys. In the front row, a young man who had laughed earlier was no longer laughing. He was sitting very still, his eyes fixed on the stage. His expression completely changed. He did not understand what he was feeling. He had heard this piece before, performed by famous musicians in famous concert halls. But it had never sounded like this. It had never felt like this. Victoria Chen picked up her pen. She had been ready to write something dismissive on her notepad. Something about wasted time and unrealistic expectations. But now her pen just hovered over the paper. Motionless. She could not look away from the man at the piano, this janitor, this nobody. This person she had dismissed the moment he walked onto the stage. He was playing Chopin like she had never heard it played before. It was not perfect. She could hear small imperfections here and there, tiny hesitations, slight inconsistencies in tempo. A trained ear could pick them out, but somehow, those imperfections did not matter. Somehow, they made the music more human, more honest, more alive. The ballade moved into its middle section, a passage of breathtaking complexity. Raymond's left hand maintained a steady rhythm while his right hand danced across the higher keys, spinning out a melody that was both beautiful and heartbreaking. His eyes were still closed. His body swayed gently with the music. He was somewhere else now, somewhere far away from this stage and these lights and these people who had laughed at him. He was in that kitchen again, listening to the radio. He was in the recital hall at midnight, teaching himself to play. He was everywhere and nowhere. Lost in the music, found in the music, becoming the music itself. The audience had changed completely. There was no more skepticism, no more judgment, only attention, only wonder. People were leaning forward in their seats, afraid to make a sound, afraid to break whatever spell had fallen over the room. A woman near the back wiped her eyes. She did not know why she was crying. She did not even like classical music that much. But something about what she was witnessing had cracked her open. This man, this ordinary man who cleaned floors for a living, was creating something extraordinary. And watching him do it felt like watching a miracle. The ballade began its final ascent. The music grew louder, faster, more urgent. Raymond's fingers flew across the keys, hitting notes that seemed impossible for someone without formal training. His whole body was engaged now, shoulders rising and falling, head tilting back, every muscle working in service of the music. This was the hardest part. The part he had practiced until his fingers bled. The part where everything came together, all the themes and melodies weaving into one final, devastating statement. Raymond thought about all the people who had told him no, all the doors that had closed in his face, all the years he had spent invisible, unnoticed, unremarkable. He thought about the laughter that had filled this very room just minutes ago. He thought about the look in Victoria Chen's eyes when she told him to get it over with, and he let all of that go. He let it flow through his fingers and into the keys. He let it become sound. He let it become something beautiful. The final chords rang out, massive and triumphant, shaking the walls of the recital hall. Raymond held them, letting them sustain, letting them echo, letting them fill every corner of the space. Then, slowly, he lifted his hands from the keys. Silence. Complete and total silence. Raymond opened his eyes. He looked out at the audience. He saw hundreds of faces staring back at him. He saw mouths hanging open. He saw tears on cheeks. He saw hands frozen in midair, as if people had wanted to clap but had forgotten how. He looked at the judge's table. He looked at Victoria Chen, and what he saw in her face made his heart stop. Victoria Chen was crying. Raymond blinked, not sure if he was seeing correctly. This woman, this world-famous pianist, who had performed for royalty, who had won every award in the business, who had looked at him with such cold pity just minutes ago, now had tears streaming down her face. She was not even trying to hide them. She just sat there, staring at him, her composure completely shattered. The silence in the hall stretched on. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3. It felt like the whole world had stopped breathing. And then, from somewhere in the back of the room, someone started clapping. It was slow at first. Just one person. Then another joined in. Then another. The clapping spread through the audience like fire through dry grass, growing louder and faster until it became a roar. People were standing up. First a few, then dozens, then everyone. The entire hall rose to its feet, applauding, cheering, some of them wiping tears from their own eyes. Raymond sat at the piano bench, frozen. He did not know what to do. He had imagined this moment so many times, dreamed about it during all those late nights alone in this same room, but now that it was actually happening, he could not make sense of it. His brain could not process what his eyes and ears were telling him. They were clapping for him. All these people, all these strangers. They were on their feet, clapping for him. The ovation went on and on. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 3. Raymond finally managed to stand up, his legs shaky beneath him. He gave a small, awkward bow, not knowing what else to do. The applause only grew louder. At the judges' table, the 2 male judges were also standing, clapping along with everyone else. Their expressions had completely transformed. The same men who had been shaking their heads and laughing just minutes ago now looked stunned, humbled, like they had just witnessed something they would never forget. But Raymond's eyes kept going back to Victoria Chen. She had risen from her seat. She was still crying, not bothering to wipe the tears away. And then she did something that made Raymond's heart nearly stop for the second time that day. She started walking toward the stage. The audience noticed. The applause began to quiet as people watched her climb the short staircase at the side of the stage. She walked across the polished wooden floor, her heels clicking with each step, until she was standing right in front of Raymond. For a long moment, she just looked at him. Her eyes were red and wet. Up close, she looked different than she did on television or in magazine photos. She looked human, vulnerable, real. Then she reached out and took both of his hands in hers. "I have been playing piano for 45 years, she said. Her voice was thick with emotion, and the microphone on the judge's table picked up every word, broadcasting it through the speakers to the entire hall. "I have studied at the finest conservatories in the world. I have performed on the greatest stages. I have heard thousands of musicians play this piece." She paused, squeezing his hands tighter. "But I have never," she continued, her voice breaking slightly, "never heard it played like that. What you just did was not a performance. It was a confession. It was a prayer. It was the most honest music I have heard in my entire career." Raymond could not speak. His throat had closed up completely. He felt tears burning in his own eyes now, threatening to spill over. Victoria Chen turned to face the audience, still holding one of his hands. "This man," she announced, her voice growing stronger, "has no formal training. He has never taken a single lesson. He taught himself to play by watching videos on his phone after his shifts as a janitor. Right here. In this building. While we were all too busy and too important to notice, a murmur went through the crowd. People were looking at each other, shaking their heads in disbelief. We laughed at him," Victoria continued. "Some of us. We looked at his old suit and his rough hands, and we laughed. We assumed we knew what he was. We assumed we knew what he could do. We assumed we knew what he could do." She turned back to Raymond, and when she spoke again, her words were meant just for him, even though everyone could hear. "I am sorry. I am truly sorry. I almost did not give you a chance. I almost told you to leave before you even played a single note, and if I had done that, I would have missed one of the most important moments of my life." Raymond finally found his voice. It came out rough, barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to play," he said. "That's all I ever wanted. Just to play." Victoria smiled through her tears. "And you did. My God, you did." The audience erupted again. The applause was even louder this time, mixed with cheers and whistles and shouts. Raymond saw people in the front rows pulling out their phones, recording everything. He saw the camera operators zooming in on his face. He saw the other judges standing at their table, clapping with genuine admiration. But more than anything, he saw the young musicians he had watched earlier. The violinist with the perfect technique, the teenage saxophone player, the opera singer with the voice like an angel. They were all on their feet, all applauding, all looking at him with something he had never expected to see: respect. Victoria Chen led Raymond to the front of the stage. She raised his hand in the air like he was a champion boxer who had just won the title fight of his life. The cheers grew even louder. "This is what music is about," Victoria called out to the audience. "Not degrees, not pedigrees, not expensive teachers or fancy schools. It is about heart. It is about soul. It is about having something to say and finding a way to say it. This man has more of that than anyone I have met in years." Raymond looked out at the sea of faces. He thought about all the nights he had spent in this very hall, alone, invisible, playing for no one but himself. He thought about the bucket and the mop and the gray uniform. He thought about his co-workers laughing at him, telling him to stick to what he knew. He thought about his father, who had worked himself to exhaustion driving a truck so his family could eat. He thought about his mother, sitting in that nursing home, her mind slowly fading away. He wished they could see him now. He wished they could know that their son, their ordinary, unremarkable son, had just made a room full of strangers cry with the beauty of his music. Victoria Chen was speaking again, saying something about the competition, about what would happen next. But Raymond was not really listening. He was too overwhelmed, too full of emotions he did not have names for. When he finally walked off the stage, his legs felt like they might give out at any moment. A production assistant led him to a small room backstage, gave him a bottle of water, told him to take as much time as he needed. Then she left, closing the door softly behind her. Raymond sat down in a folding chair. He put his face in his hands, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he let himself cry. Not tears of sadness, not tears of pain. These were different. These were tears of release. Tears of relief. Tears of a man who had carried a dream in his heart for 45 years and had finally been able to let it out. He cried for the little boy in the kitchen, listening to the radio. He cried for the teenager who had to drop out of school. He cried for the young man who got married too early and divorced too late. He cried for all the years of hard work and quiet desperation and stubborn, foolish hope. And when the tears finally stopped, when he lifted his head and wiped his face with the back of his hand, Raymond felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt free. Raymond did not win the competition that day. The first place went to a young cellist from New York, a prodigy who had been playing since she was 4 years old. She was brilliant, and she deserved every bit of her victory. But something else happened. Something bigger than any trophy or prize money. The video went viral. One of the audience members had recorded Raymond's entire performance on their phone. They posted it online that same night, with a simple caption: "Janitor with no training plays Chopin. Watch what happens." Within 24 hours, the video had been viewed over 2 million times. Within a week, it had crossed 50 million. Raymond woke up the morning after the audition to find his phone buzzing with notifications. Messages from people he had not spoken to in years. Friend requests from complete strangers. Emails from news stations asking for interviews. His face was everywhere. On television. On social media. On websites he had never even heard of. The story spread like wildfire. News channels around the world picked it up. They loved the narrative. The underdog. The hidden talent. The man who mopped floors by day and played piano by night. Headlines called him the janitor pianist and the custodian Chopin. Talk show hosts discussed his story with tears in their eyes. Celebrities shared the video and wrote about how it had moved them. Raymond did not know how to handle any of it. He was a private man, had been his whole life. He did not like attention. He did not like being the center of anything. For 3 days, he unplugged his phone and stayed in his apartment, trying to make sense of what was happening. On the 4th day, someone knocked on his door. It was Victoria Chen. She stood in the hallway of his modest apartment building, looking completely out of place in her elegant coat and expensive shoes. She smiled when he opened the door, a warm smile that was nothing like the cold expression she had worn at the audition. "May I come in?" she asked. They sat at his small kitchen table, drinking coffee from mismatched mugs. Victoria looked around the apartment, at the worn furniture and the water stain on the ceiling, and the old piano keyboard propped against the wall. It was a cheap electronic keyboard. The kind you could buy at a department store for $100. Raymond had used it to practice when he could not get to the conservatory. "This is where you learned," Victoria said quietly. "This is where it all started." Raymond nodded. "It's not much, but it was enough." Victoria set down her coffee mug and looked at him with serious eyes. "I came here to offer you something. The conservatory wants to give you a full scholarship. Room, board, tuition, everything. You would study with our best teachers. You would have access to practice rooms whenever you wanted. You would get the education you never had the chance to receive." Raymond stared at her. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. "You deserve this," Victoria continued. "What you have is rare. It's a gift, and with proper training, there's no limit to what you could achieve." For a long moment, Raymond did not respond. He looked at the keyboard against the wall. He looked at his rough hands wrapped around the coffee mug. He thought about all the years he had spent dreaming about something exactly like this. "I'm 52 years old," he finally said. "Most of your students are kids." Victoria smiled. "Music doesn't care about age." "Neither do I." 2 months later, Raymond walked through the doors of the Westbrook Conservatory. But this time, he was not carrying a mop. He was carrying a bag full of sheet music and a heart full of hope. The first few months were hard. Harder than he had expected. The other students were decades younger than him. They had skills and knowledge he did not possess. They could read music at sight, could analyze compositions with technical precision, could discuss theory and history in ways that made his head spin. Raymond often felt lost, often felt like he did not belong, but he kept going, he kept practicing, he kept learning, and slowly, things began to change. His teachers discovered that while Raymond lacked formal knowledge, he had an intuition that could not be taught. He understood music on a level that went beyond notes and scales. He felt it in his bones, and when they combined that natural gift with proper technique, something remarkable emerged. A year after his audition, Raymond gave his first official concert. It was held in the same recital hall where he had once mopped the floors, the same hall where he had been laughed at, where he had played the performance that changed his life. This time, every seat was filled. People had traveled from other states just to see him. Tickets had sold out in less than an hour. His children came, both of them. They sat in the front row, watching their father with pride in their eyes. Raymond had not seen them in almost 2 years before all of this happened, but after the video went viral, they had reached out. They had apologized for being distant. They had told him they were proud of him, that they had always been proud of him. Even when they forgot to say it, his mother was there too, in a way. She could not travel anymore, could not leave the nursing home, but the concert was live-streamed, and the staff set up a tablet in her room so she could watch. She did not always remember who Raymond was these days, but when he sat down at the piano and began to play, something shifted in her face. Her eyes grew clear for just a moment. She smiled, and even though she could not find the words anymore, Raymond liked to believe that somewhere deep inside, she knew that her son had finally become who he was always meant to be. The concert was a triumph. Critics called it one of the most moving performances they had ever witnessed. Raymond played Chopin again, the same ballade that had started everything. But he also played other pieces, some classical, some original compositions he had written himself. Each one told a different part of his story. Each one carried a different piece of his heart. After the concert, Victoria Chen found him backstage. She hugged him tightly, something she had never done before. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it." But Raymond's story did not end there. The fame, the concerts, the interviews, they were all wonderful, but they were not enough. Raymond had spent too many years being invisible to forget what that felt like. He knew there were others like him out there. People with dreams they had buried, people with talents they had never been given the chance to discover. He used the money he earned from his performances to start a foundation. He called it Second Chance Music. It offered free piano lessons to adults who had never had the opportunity to learn. Factory workers, single mothers, retired veterans, anyone who had ever been told they were too old, too poor, too ordinary to make music. The program grew quickly. Within 2 years, there were Second Chance Music Centers in 12 cities across the country. Raymond visited as many as he could, sitting down with students, sharing his story, reminding them that it was never too late. "The world will tell you no," he would say to them. "The world will tell you to be realistic, to stay in your lane, to stick to what you know. But here's the truth. The world doesn't get to decide who you are. Only you get to decide that. And if there's something inside you that wants to come out, something you've been carrying for years, don't let anyone tell you it's too late. It's not too late. It's never too late." Raymond is 61 years old now. His hair has gone gray, his hands are slower than they used to be, but he still plays every single day, sometimes at concert halls, sometimes at small community centers, sometimes alone in his apartment, late at night, just like he used to. And every time his fingers touch the keys, he remembers that moment. The laughter, the doubt, the fear, and then the music, rising up from somewhere deep inside him, proving everyone wrong. They laughed at him, but he played anyway. And that made all the difference.